9 o'clock.
We're calling to order the Planning Commission meeting of January 12th, 2017. And right now, if we would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Goodrich, good morning. Do we have any changes or comments to the agenda?
Yes, we do. There are three items. First change is item number 3. It's PDC-16-04 ZP, Imperial Lakes Commercial. There is a public comment letter that is attached to the memo. Item number 5 is PDMU-15-19G, I-75 Office Park, delete stipulation C1 and revise recommended motion in the memo. And lastly, number 6, this item we're requesting be moved to the first item on the agenda. There was an advertising error. This is the Z16-07 Robbins Apartment LLC. Staff will discuss the advertising error when this comes forward.
Thank you. Ms. Schenk, any comments or changes to the agenda?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, do we have any issue with number 6 moving up to the first spot on the agenda?
Sure.
Yep. Great. Do I have a motion for minutes, please? Approval.
Motion to approve, Chair.
Second.
Bauer, second Mr. Ram. All in favor?
Aye.
Approval? Aye. County Clerk, would you please state the procedures and the swearing in?
Anyone wishing to address the board at today's hearings, please rise and be administered the oath. Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to this board will be truthful and accurate? I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any citizens that'd like to make a comment on an item that is not to be discussed on the agenda? So it would be outside the agenda for today. No comments? All right. Commissioners, do we have any comments on the consent agenda? Nope. All right. Mr. Goodrich, would you please read in the first item on the consent agenda?
Moving item 6 to the first is Z-16-07 Robbins Apartment LLC. And that is a rezone of approximately 7.38 acres located on the east side of First Street East and south of US 301, commonly known as 2303 First Street East in Bradenton.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe, all right, would you please explain to us?
Good morning, Commissioners. Brandon Rowe, Building Development Services. I've been sworn. It came to our attention this morning before the public hearing that there was actually an error in the staff report and subsequently in the advertising. The acreage is not correct in the advertising, so we will need to re-advertise. And we're requesting a continuance to the next scheduled Planning Commission, which would be February 9th, which would push back moving forward to Board of County Commissioners land use hearing to March 2nd instead of February 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, what you need to do is really
Take a motion.
open the public hearing, see if anyone wants to speak, and then close it. And we'll stay for the record, it's being re-advertised.
Okay. Item number 6. Do we have any comments from the citizens? All right. Commissioners, do we have any comments on item number 6? All right.
I just wanted, I was curious, the mistake in the advertising, how did that come about? I'm just curious.
Well, Mr. Chair, we don't want to discuss the advertising issue right now.
Okay, sorry.
We're just going to redo it.
Okay, thank you. Item number 3 then, going
Well,
back.
should we move to,
Oh, I'm sorry, the motion?
I move to.
A motion to approve?
Continue.
I move to continue this matter till the next planning commission meeting.
Do we have a second, please?
Second.
Second, Mr. Desline. All in favor of postponing to the next month, please?
Aye.
Aye. So passed. Okay. Item number 3. Mr. Goodrich, could you please read into the procedures?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Item 3 is PC-16-04ZP, Imperial Lakes Golf Course Homesite, Inc. / GCI Parcel B LLC / Imperial Renaissance LLC property owner / Primerica Group contract purchaser / Imperial Lakes Commercial. This is a rezone of approximately 13.23 acres of a 33.12 acre total project area from PRD Planned Development Residential to the PDC Planned Development Commercial Zoning District, of which approximately 19.89 acres is already zoned PDC Planned Development Commercial, generally located south of Buffalo Road and east of I-75 and commonly known as 9680 Buffalo Road in Palmetto. Be approving a preliminary site plan for a commercial / retail shopping center containing approximately 201,000 square feet, 138,651 square feet of commercial / retail, and 61,380 square feet for a 118-room hotel, and approving a schedule of uses voluntarily proffered by the applicant.
Thank you. Ms. Tusing, any comments at this time? Or
No, sir. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer them. I think Mr. Goodrich described the project.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any ex parte communications that should be stated?
Sure.
Applicant presentation? Do we have any reason for Commissioners Good? All right. No comments then from anyone? All right, Ms. Tusing, any final comment? No?
Comment.
You need a public?
That's true, right. Any public comments on item number 3? Imperial Lakes? No one's coming forward? All right. Ms. Tusing, any final comment from staff?
No, sir. We recommend approval with stipulations.
Okay. No comments from commissioners? Do we have any motion then on item number 3?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Delsline.
based upon staff report evidence presented, comments made at the public hearing, and findings, the request to be consistent with Manatee County Comprehensive Plan and the Manatee County Land Development Code as conditioned herein, I move to recommend adoption of Manatee County zoning ordinance number PDC 1604ZP, approval of the preliminary site plan with stipulations 1 through 14, granting special approval for project located adjacent to an interstate connector, Moxawalla Road, designated as entranceway, as recommended by staff.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Ron, all in favor of the motion? Say aye.
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 Aye. So passed. Thank you. Mr. Goodrich, if you would go to item number 4, please.
Yes, item number 4 is PDC-16-09ZG, Floridian Properties, Inc. / RCCW Development. It's a rezone of approximately 9.75 acres, generally located southeast and southwest corners of State Route 64 East and Schoolhouse Road, and north of the Lena Road landfill property, and commonly known as 9500, 9516, 9602, 9616, and 9812 State Route 64 East in Bradenton. This would be from A1 Agricultural Suburban, NC-S Neighborhood Commercial Small, LM Light Manufacturing and PDI Plan Development Industrial to the PDC Plan Development Commercial Zoning District, approving a general development plan for a general retail/commercial development totaling approximately 51,000 square feet, and approving a schedule of uses as voluntary proffered by the applicant.
Thank you. Once again, Ms. Toussaint, any opening comment?
No, sir.
Okay. Any ex parte communications on this item from the commissioners? Any questions related to the project from the commissioners? Okay. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Presentation, all right.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Don New, agent for the project, and I have been sworn. As read, we are asking for a general development plan, and I think you'll see how we're going to kind of clean it up a little bit on all those different zonings. The owner is the Floridian Properties and our environmental consultant. Here's our team, Eco and Transportation for Kimley Horn, and Civil Engineering and Morris Engineering. I'm serving as agent for the project. Here we are on the south side of 64 at Old Schoolhouse Road. And here is the parcel, aerial location. You can see it's at the intersection there on both sides of the intersection. And then zoomed in a little bit, just right at the intersection, we proposed some, and I'll show you a concept plan on each side of the intersection. The request is, we're about 9.75 acres. The future land use remains the same. It's mixed use along the strip there, along 64, and we're requesting that plan development commercial and from those various zoning districts, and I'll show you why here in a second. Here's our general development plan. It's consolidating all those different zoning districts, and we'll just do it as a planned commercial district. You can see, here's the future land use. The mixed use is the strip along here. And here's the zoning request, because you've got all these different little zonings that have been come in over the years, and then we're going to consolidate them into a master plan. So the surrounding uses, north is the Plantation and Greenfield, Plantation and Hale Middle and Freedom, and south is the Manatee County property I'm going to talk about in a second, and east is FDOT retention pond for 64 and some offices, and to our west is vacant. Not much environmental impact on the site, and the impact we do is to provide access to the county to the south, I'm going to talk about in a second here. And there's no endangered species. So here's the project site plan that consolidates all those different zonings, and the reason for the general development plan is we don't have uses for here yet, and we want to plan those as exactly as we can. Now, here's an overall conceptual site plan that we've shared, and you can see that we're planning a car wash. This will be the first thing that comes in on this side, and then various commercial uses allowed in the district on the east side. We did voluntarily proffer a lot of the uses because it's a pretty broad range of uses in commercial. Work with staff, and then the table of uses, we struck out some, like the schools right across the street, so liquor stores and things like that. We went through that chart, and Ms. Tusing and I worked on that and struck out some that might be inappropriate for this area. And you can see the access to the south. Here is the county owns all this land down here. They're not exactly sure what they want to do with it. Maybe it's going to be a park, I think, maybe animal shelter. But when we first started this process, we turned in this plan where we were just going to come in, serve our area, and be on about our business. County came to us and said, wait a minute, we have all this land to the south. Would you please give us access straight down through it? So we had a series of meetings, so we said, okay. So it makes sense to come on down and give access to the county, and we'll have to account for that in our traffic study. You'll see one of the stipulations, because the county doesn't exactly know what they want to do down here, but we thought it was a good idea also to get them to that light. So we agreed to that and had several meetings about that. And and came up with the new general development plan, which you'll see on the general development plan, it has access to the south there. Everybody thought that was a good idea, and we worked that out. So with that, it was pretty simple. The comprehensive plan we're consistent with all the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. We have adequate infrastructure support. All our level of services are maintained right now. I think this project has been thoroughly vetted. We've had a lot of meetings with the county, and potable water and sanitary sewer are all available. The location is correct for these proposed uses and the ones that we proffer in the use table. Our timing is consistent. We want to get going on the car wash, and then we'll come back with final development plans. We will supply county with that access to traffic light, which we think is a good thing for the future. And we will comply with all the applicable regulations. We're concurrent. Staff recommends approval, and we respectfully request your approval. And I stand ready to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. New.
Yes.
Ms. Toussaint, staff presentation? Do you-
This is presentations upon request. Do y'all have any specific questions of me
I think we're
based on
good.
the staff report?
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Public comment or questions? I have one person that's signed up to make a comment, Mr. Mike Orman, or Orhan. Sorry about
I'm
that.
Dr. Sycon. I represent MNC LLC Properties that's immediately west of the property we've been shown. And I approve I agree with the zoning, new zoning. My question is that we had about a 17,000 square foot building approved a few years back, and it since has gone past its approval time. But on that drawing, we had an access road that went east and west that was parallel with Highway 64. That would allow joining property to be able to pass through without having to circumvent the roads and so forth. And so I would request that an access road be made, just like they did south, to make one to the properties that are immediately west of their property. And I think Mrs. Tussing said that there was some kind of a board zoning where this has already been made. So I'm not sure. Can I clarify that? Well, you're saying no, but do you understand what I'm asking?
When you're finished, we'll ask staff to make a
So
comment.
what I'm asking is that there should be access from people that are coming from the east to make a turn on that intersection and cross over the previous property to the properties that are immediately adjoining it. A bypass and access road.
Right, okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for him.
Yes, Mr. Bauer.
Not knowing this spot exactly, so is there some sort of access road on all the properties that are east of you, headed towards Lakewood Ranch Boulevard?
No.
No.
I have an access if you're driving from west to east into the property. But as far as if you had to enter, come from the west, you'd have to go down a quarter of a mile, make a U-turn and come back. But I'm just saying on the previous drawings that we've had approved before by this county, there was in our parking lot, we had an access near 64 that crossed over to the adjoining properties that were east and west of us. And that drawing now, I mean, that's something that ran out of its approval, so it has to be redone. But I was understanding that that was a requirement that the zoning board had made for properties in this area to have an access to properties that are east and west
So
of this.
if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're asking for potentially is, since there's a potential for an intersection to be at this schoolhouse drive, what have you, into this property, to turn into as you're heading from east to west, so that other people coming to your property potentially don't have to go all the way down to make a UE,
Yes.
have an access road from there going towards your property.
Exactly,
Is
yes.
that what you're asking?
Yes. And again, a few years back, we had a a large building approved and so forth, and because of the economy, it fell through. But on that drawing, we did have access to both properties.
Okay.
Mr. Horrigan? Oh,
You're asking that the right-of-way be available, or are you asking for them to build the road?
Oh, right away, that I would say that each property would build their own road, but
So you're just asking for
Shared entry
a shared entry?
I think.
or common.
So have you talked to the landowners about this?
What landowner? I'm representing.
Your next door neighbor that you want the access through, have you talked to them?
Well, I'm the next door neighbor, and I'm requesting.
Know that, but the parcel you're next to, have you talked to your guy that is your neighbor?
No, I haven't.
Did that ever come up? Oh, sorry. I'm
so we don't know if this is
offensive.
to be considered or not even to be considered. There's been no discussion prior to us discussing it right now. Is that factual?
Correct.
Well, Mr. Rutledge, may we get advice from our expert traffic department as to whether it is better to try and flow that traffic through there as opposed to make a U-turn if there was something on that other side? Is there any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Rutledge, for the record, Thomas Gerstenberger, Public Works Department, I've been sworn. With respect to the request at hand, typically what would be done through private properties would be an agreement such as a cross-access agreement where an easement would be provided over the internal driveway system between the two properties to provide interconnectivity and, as alluded to, the cross-access between the adjacent properties. That particular discussion typically is a private discussion between the two property owners. I would point out in this particular case, given the location, there is already an existing traffic signal at the intersection of Schoolhouse Drive and State Road 64. And there are already turn lanes with medians on State Road 64 at the particular intersection as well for full access at that intersection.
But Doctor, you don't have access from a traffic light to your property.
No, that's the question.
So my question really was going back to, is it safer for the highway if somebody was trying to come from out east to west to bypass it, make a U-turn and come back in to access that property if that's where they're going? I mean, there's nothing there, so we just arbitrarily. But my question is, would we be prudent to give an access point so people didn't have to get off that way, could use that traffic access? It would add traffic to their place, but that's what you're asking, right?
Yeah, and on a previous property approval, we were required to have one.
I understood that, yes, sir. See, it seems to me that my experience has been that where you have newer developments, that's a requirement, that they don't want you going back on the highway to access. You know, when we do a big development over 10 or 15 acres, they want people to be captured in that thing and not back off and on the road. So if it hadn't been discussed, it's a little hard to comment on it. It seems logical to me, but I don't want to. Okay, I understand.
Mr. Horrigan?
I'm going through exactly a similar discussion with my neighbor for a commercial building that I own, and they've asked me to, leave a couple of parking spaces go in return for being able to park on their property next door. So I do understand that these conversations can go on between the next door neighbors, but it should be between the neighbors, not something that we do. And the other comment is that my building requires me to go up and make a U-turn at Lakewood Ranch Road. That's the most dangerous U-turn in the state. It's horrible. So, I mean, we should be having these accesses resolved in the process, because people coming out of Lakewood Ranch High School in the afternoon, they're coming down there and they're making a right-hand turn. They don't even look in any other direction. If you're making a U-turn there, you have to stop in the middle of the road, running the risk of getting back-ended. So I think that is something that we should deal with at another time.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but to do it privately, I can't see that working. that if somebody has their property and they have so many parking spots, how am I going to get them to privately
Give them two
allow
more.
this?
I've done it a million times.
Okay.
I mean, it does go on all the time. It's not that complicated. I bet you could pick two guys or three guys or young ladies in the room here could all figure it out in not 10 minutes. But it's a business transaction. That's the problem. It's not that it can't be figured out. It gets figured out.
I was under the understanding when I talked to Margaret that there was a previous clause that said you had to have an access.
I'm not smart.
Accounting.
I don't.
That only
Right, well-
applies if you're located within the entranceway. This project is not. That is a code requirement if you're in the entranceway. This project is not located
in
in
that.
the entranceway.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from any citizens on the item before us? Close the public comments. Staff, commissioners, any comments at all from staff? No? Any final comments from the applicant? Great.
No, this takes me by surprise, but I will say that the narrowness of that, on that west side of our parcel, that wetland comes up and it's very narrow there. And there's not much I can do about that. When it was all vacant, maybe if you did the whole thing, we're attempting to consolidate all these zoning districts, but on that west side, west of our intersection there, that wetland comes up and it's very narrow there.
Okay, but it might just behoove you just to talk to the
I
gentleman.
will.
Explain it a
I
little
will.
better
He
so
just
he
asked me
has an
for my
understanding.
card, and I will certainly do that and see if we can, in any way accommodate it. But
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Do we have a motion on item number 5?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair. Based upon the staff report, evidence presented, comments made at the public hearing, and the finding be consistent with the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan and the Manatee County Development Code, conditioned herein, I move to recommend adoption of the Manatee County zoning ordinance, PDC 16909ZG, approval of the general development plan with stipulations 1 through 6, granting special approval for the project in the MU mixed-use future land use category as recommended by staff.
Thank you. Do we have a second motion?
Second.
Mr. Lessline, thank you. All in favor of the motion before us, aye, please.
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Point of order. These items are all on the consent agenda, are they not?
No.
No,
Presentation only.
presentation only.
Presentation as,
I find that confusing
Yeah,
sometimes.
because it's right under, yeah,
Yes.
I don't have a consent agenda today.
okay. Great.
Item number 5. Mr. Goodrich, your turn again, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 is PDMU-15-19G, I-75 Office Park LLC / I-75 Office Park. This is a general development plan to allow for 3 development options on a 19.17 plus or minus acre site. Option A, to consist of 99,516 square feet of office use space. Option B, to consist of 33,200 square feet of office use space and a 234-bed assisted living facility. Or Option C, to consist of 160 multifamily residential units. The site is zoned PDMU/WP E and hyphen or /ST. This is a planned development use / watershed protection Evers / special treatment overlay district. It's located east of I-75, approximately 250 feet west of Town Center Parkway at 8915, 8925, 8935, 8945, 8956, and 8966 77th Terrace, East Bradenton.
Thank you. Ms. Leader, any introductory comments by the staff?
This is presentation open request. If you have any particular question, I'm ready to answer the question unless you would like a full presentation.
Staff, any request? Mr. Bauer?
I don't know if this pertains to a full presentation or not, but I would like to hear about these legal matters and issues that relates to all 3 potential options in the application?
I think, Mr. Chair, you should open the public hearing, let the applicant make their presentation.
Okay,
Which is fine by me, I just asked.
okay. Any ex parte communications from the commissioners? Applicant, presentation, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm
Good morning.
Scott Rudisill. I'm an attorney at Blaylock Walters. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We'd be happy to make a full presentation. Alternatively, we could maybe just try to address Commissioner Bauer's questions directly, if that's okay with the commission. Either way would be fine with
I think we could go with the modified one to address the concerns that were brought up by the
Okay.
commissioner.
Commissioner, I'm trying to understand specifically what, some of the legal issues that were raised by the county attorney's office were related to the property ownership and the fact that you've got, if you look at this project, this is a stalled office project. So it was originally approved for 10 buildings. 4 of them have been built, and those buildings are in private ownership. That's why when you look at the GDP, you'll see 2 little boxes there that have been cut out, essentially. So a question was raised by the county attorney's office about the ownership of the remaining parcel and whether that had been turned over to a condominium association. And the answer to that is no, it has not. That the common elements were essentially phase 11 of the project. So after the buildings had been built, the common elements were to be turned over to the association. That never happened because the project failed. So we're essentially in a position now where when that happens, when the project gets completed, we're going to have to come back and work with the property owners who are there to develop a new condominium declaration for the property. Does that answer?
A little bit, a
Okay.
little bit. So, from what I'm reading, let me bring it back up. I apologize. Maybe Ms. Shank could also talk about this a little bit, but it appears that potentially it is unclear as to whether the applicant has legal authority to file a pending application for approval of the GDP. Is that still the case? Are we, I don't know if this, bottom line is, from my perspective, we here go and approve this project, application. However, maybe something comes up and these other property owners, other parties, they object or whatever. So what happens is, as usual, a lawsuit. The lawsuit is filed against you and it's filed against the county. So before I would want to say, yeah, go ahead and let's try to work this out, what protection does the county have? Does the county have a hold harmless from the applicant? With all this, all these things in this particular application and the potential liability on the county with these, which I don't know is answered or unanswered, what protection does the county have from basically liability down the road should something not happen the way you want to with your other parties?
Sure. I think we've addressed the ownership issue to the satisfaction of the county attorney's office. Obviously, the county has the potential to be dragged into a suit by a third party on any development approval that comes through. The applicant has been required to provide an affidavit of ownership with the application. So if it were to turn out through legal proceedings that the applicant did not have fee ownership of the property, then that would be something that the county could use to overturn that approval if it was based on false information. So I think that issue has been addressed. I think it's also telling that there's nobody here from the property owners. It's my understanding, I haven't been directly involved, but the developer has been working with the existing property owners to make sure that they're comfortable with what's going on in the project. So I think the fact that they clearly would have been noticed and they're not here is telling. Oh, maybe they are here.
Ms. Shank, do you have any comments related to Mr. Byers' what-if question?
Well, I think my memo speaks for itself. I'd rather hear from the public to see if anyone is here representing the condominium. If the applicant had made a presentation, which would have been nice, and if the planner had pointed out where the common elements are, you would have seen that they can't exist independently of going through the property that are the common elements. And as Mr. Russo stated, they do have to true up their condominium documents, and they haven't done that yet. It's sort of a paperwork thing, but right now, the declaration of condominium is equivalent to an enforceable equitable servitude. So those doctors, or whoever owns those little units and those gray buildings, can sue the county and the applicant for violating declaration of covenants and restrictions in the condominium document, potentially. Just based on paperwork. I know everyone's working together, but that's a private matter between the applicant and the condominium association. This doesn't go to whether the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but if I don't raise these issues now, I can't raise them later. And someone will say, why didn't you bring it up? And they submit an RLS for me to look at this. And I've never seen this before in my many years of practice. So I just found it to be unique, and unusual circumstances sometimes, wind up the county being in a lawsuit, as Mr. Bowell pointed out. So I'm just stating it in the record, so the Plan Commission Board are fully informed. The county attorney office doesn't make recommendations whether to approve or deny a project, and it may be beyond your consistency review that you look at. But I just wanted to state the issues in the record, and I was curious to see if anyone from the condominium association would speak, so I think we have to go through the process
Okay.
to hear from everyone.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rutledge, you had a
Yeah, I
comment?
have several questions. So one is, so you've clarified you have possession of the surrounding component, but do you have control of the association that manages the access? Because having property rights are subordinate to the association rights. So if you own the property, that's fine, but you still have subordinate rights to the association. Do you have control of the association?
No, but
Let me finish my next
Sure.
step. So the answer to that is no. Secondarily, is you would be in the same position as a property owner as these other two entities in the board. Is that correct, or is that not correct? Do you have a premier voting position?
to be honest, I can't answer, and I'm not their condominium attorney.
No, but you're
so-
going to own this land that's going to be a part of that, right?
Correct.
And you don't know your voting rights?
I'm not saying, I'm sure they know their voting rights, but I don't know because it's not relevant to this application because the common elements have not been turned over to the association. The association right now doesn't have any property to control.
But the association has the rights as stipulated, right? It has a document that's been filed with the state, says, I'm an association with these rights, correct?
Yes, the association has been created, is my understanding. But again,
Going with this? You're just like these other three components to the association, correct, as a landowner?
well, no, because the the developer owns all the property. None of that was turned over to the condominium ownership.
But these not included are also in the same position, correct or not? They haven't been
The
turned
two
over to the
parcels
association.
not included? Yes, correct.
You see my question about voting rights? Because my opinion, having done this with big department stores, they're not that much fun to negotiate with. When you give leverage, either by access or voting rights or something like that, you change the balance of what goes on. So okay, I think I understand, but do you think you're premature in submitting this without having resolved that, or not knowing that?
Well, it's actually kind of a chicken and egg scenario for the developer because without knowing what's going to be built there, it's difficult to complete the condominium. So, that's something that they've been struggling with. But I think my understanding of and we did submit from the condominium attorney an opinion to the county attorney's office related to this issue. My understanding is that what the existing property owners have is essentially, as Ms. Shanks said, like an equitable servitude. They have to be provided with parking and access and these sorts of things, but it's not specific as to how that is supposed to occur. So the plan is to work through those issues once the developer figures out what's actually going in there.
Curious, huh?
It is unique, and obviously with a failed project, you have difficult issues that have to be worked through. So, this this is good for the county that somebody's willing to pick it up and try to get through it.
Agreed 100%.
Mr. Horgan, you had a comment?
Yeah, comment, question. Has an association been formed for, I assume this is out where the dermatologist office is?
I think the answer is,
I'm just asking, just for reference, where it is.
Mr. Rutledge, Mr. Horgan, Chairman. Peter Logan, on behalf of the applicant. Do we have to be sworn for this?
yes.
I have not been sworn yet.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to the board will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit to speak to Mr. Rutledge, and then Mr. Horgan, I'll address your question as well. And there is a representative of the association here, and I don't know whether he's planning to speak or not, but there is one here, so apologize for not recognizing that. The condominium law under the state of Florida, as I understand it, and I am not an attorney, is unique because it requires, at least in this particular case, that all the phases be submitted to the association within 7 years. Because of the failure of this particular project, that was not done. So the phases that were not submitted to the association include not only the private pads for the additional buildings, but all of the common areas as well. So those phases are owned privately, not in the way of an association. The association obviously has rights, and Mr. Rudisell spoke correctly. We did have our condominium attorney, Tim Knowles, from Porges Hamlin Knowles across the street, submit a memo to that effect that explained that essentially there was flexibility in the fact that we own the property, but that we have an obligation, if you will, to maintain and or provide adequate parking, buffers, stormwater drainage, et cetera, all of the county requirements that would have been set forth on those individual property owners if they were standalone properties. With regard to Mr. Horgan's question, there is an association. The association is formed. It is controlled by the members who own those 4 individual buildings. One of those is here today. Does that adequately address your question, Mr. Horgan, and then Mr. Rutledge after that?
I mean, typically, a developer doesn't turn a property over to the association until they've sold X number of parcels, and they maintain control of the association during that period. But that apparently did not happen here.
I do not know factually whether it was turned over. It may have been turned over by kind of a default situation or because the time ticked out. I don't know the answer to that factually, whether it was formally turned over to the association members or not. But from a time standpoint, because no property can be added into the association because of the 7 years, when we spoke with legal counsel and we got 3 different legal opinions before we bought this property on this condo issue, we felt comfortable that we had the flexibility that we needed to be able to pursue alternative designs and proposals on the balance of the property, again, so long as we didn't impede on the rights of the existing owners and the ability to park and access and so forth.
Those 3 different opinions, they all agreed.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Different.
They did. We got 3 confirming opinions, all of the same ilk. Mr. Rutledge.
Yes, can I go back and ask the question? So with your research, do all of the components that are in the association have similar voting rights? Because one of the things we did is to keep control so we could manage it well, that was our opinion, was to give preferential voting rights to a certain portion of them. So if you retained 5 pads versus 2 pads, you had more leverage to say what you could and couldn't do. And so I'm just curious whether you have determined, do they have the same standing in the negotiations as you do? In other words, is there a differential in threshold rights? I know you have bigger property and you have the access point and all those things, but to the extent that they came in with the assumption that there would be 5 board votes with them having 1 versus now they have 1 and there's 7 on the other. Do you understand my question?
I do understand your question. My understanding from speaking with Mr. Knowles about this particular issue is the current situation is very similar to scrapping the fact that there's an association, and basically you have essentially now 2 landowners adjacent to each other, the association and the private landowner, who have to kind of formalize and negotiate what this ends up looking like in terms of right to access. There's a sign out front that the existing owners obviously want to have some level of control over, stormwater, et cetera, et cetera. So your voting rights it's a good question, but my understanding is it doesn't apply in this particular case because of the 7-year clock that is ticked out.
And that's kind of my point. In other words, by giving you these approvals, it doesn't give you may not give you a significant leverage differential over those people who want to have access rights and so forth. Again, you have a larger share, you have more things to consider, but they've been there, they slugged through this, whatever's happened. There's always a change in power balance, and that kind of.
There's always a change in power balance, and obviously, there is some discussions and negotiations going on because we do own fee simple the common areas, but, I mean, in fact, if we were to be silly enough to try and impede those owners from utilizing those common areas, which they have a right to, we would ultimately lose that in court.
It's not beneficial to be adversarial.
Correct.
Then it's just like this other guy, the doctor, is that you have to negotiate. And
Correct.
Sometimes you have more things to give than get.
That's correct. And we have had multiple meetings with the association. We have had meetings with attorneys. They have gone back and forth, and the current thing is, as I understand it, I haven't spoken directly with the association in a couple weeks, or a couple months probably. They wanted to get through kind of the planning commission, get a feel for where this was going to go, and then sit down and iron out the concerns of the association, which we have already had some preliminary meetings, so I don't think any of those are going to be a surprise, but that final meeting, if you will, to strike a deal has not occurred yet. But there's plenty of history there that we would not be starting from scratch. And Dr. Mike, if I say anything incorrectly, please feel free to correct me under public comment. I don't know when my turn is. Okay.
I don't either.
Coming up. Any further comments? Mr. Logan, thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Okay.
Very helpful.
Ms. Leader, any comments related to the items that we've been discussing?
No, it's not my area of expertise, the condominium. If you have any question related to the compliance with the land development code or the comprehensive plan, I am able to respond.
I had one question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Chair. In this plan, is there any significant changes to the services that will be provided to the other group? In other words, is there a major change expected with retention, green space, parking requirements, any of those things that would change the dynamics of the people sitting there and operating today their business?
This is a GDP, and we don't have any plan particular to says if they're going to change or no the layout of the parking spaces and stormwater facilities. But the stormwater facilities are in place, and according to stormwater, they are sufficient to support the layout or the future, the entitlements that are asking to have. But if they provide in the future any particular changes, have to be reviewed a final site plan and have to comply with all the land development code regulations. It's possible that they would like to improve maybe the layout of the existing parking areas, but there is a stipulation that we put in place that they have to provide the exact number of parking spaces that for which was designed these buildings, and they have to be at final site plan to demonstrate that they comply with the regulations. Also, the application provide open space for the overall area that was approved previously, no only for the particular options. They comply with the overall open space that is required and with the overall requirement for buffers.
Okay, perfect.
Any further comments for staff? Okay. Public comments.
This is that time.
Would you give your name, and let us know if you've been sworn, please?
Or sworn at.
Morning. Dr. Michael Arsenault. I have not been sworn.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to this board will be truthful and accurate?
Yes, I do. Okay, hi, I wasn't expecting to speak today, but thank you. I am part of the dermatology group that was mentioned by Mr. Horrigan. Our building was actually the first to be completed on the property, and I served for 6, maybe 7 years, I can't remember exactly, as the president of the association. The association was formally turned over. The previous developer, Global Group Investments, they went through a default or bankruptcy, and the controlling board of Global Group did formally relinquish control to us, to the association. I think the question was brought up. Typically, it's at a certain level of development where the developer turns it over. Because of the extenuating circumstances, that was a formal process and recorded. Our association has existed during that time, about 6 years, maybe 7 years. And when we had come to understand that the balance of the property was sold to Medallion Homes, I read about that in a Bradenton Herald article. I reached out to the reporter and ultimately got a chance to meet the leadership over at Medallion. We spoke with them. At that point, we had suggested and offered that they come in under our association because there was clearly some sharing issues that were going to come up. I think that they tacitly declined that. We have had a discussion with them ongoing for the last year. I would say that discussion has kind of trailed off, I would say, in the last couple of months. So we do have legal on each side trying to come to an accord as far as some of the development issues that we're concerned about as property owners, as far as the architectural elements. There's other sharing elements with Phase 11, access issues, easement issues. The owners and the association have had concerns because there's a variety of different plans on the table, and they're pretty diverse. One of them is just an extension of the current commercial space, which would fall right in alignment with what we had, my wife and I had expected that property would be developed into when we originally bought it. Then one of the options is for an assisted living facility on the north part of the property. Another option is for multifamily. As business owners, Class A medical space, we've had some concerns about how the area would be devised, whether there would be proper buffering in place. To this day, we had a brief meeting with Medallion, and briefly saw some plans, but have not been involved in the planning as much as we would like, as far as how traffic would come onto the site, how the buffering may occur, and so forth. So that pretty much brings us up to date as far as just also to note that I am a board member, but I'm no longer an officer of the association, so I cannot actually speak for the association in that regard.
Thank you, Doctor. Any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Rutledge?
So I'm new on the board, but it's from what you said about the association being turned over and operating doesn't seem to be consistent with what we just heard, which was the association doesn't really exist. Am I confused by this? You've been operating the association, they have a budget, they've maintained the property, they've
Correct.
been acting under the state of Florida guidelines, right?
We have documents, the whole thing.
I'm just not so sure the doctor and everybody else's legal concerns actually deal with the comprehensive plan, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah,
I
we
can
had sort of-
understand where it's going to be a,
We sort of veered off into
Yeah,
a
we
what
veered
if
off into something I don't know if we-
situation here.
we actually
Chair,
should
if I may.
decide on.
Right.
Just to comment, I mean, normally you have all interested parties filing the application or consenting to the application. The condo association has not done that. So therefore, I'm just saying an example, if there were any stipulations imposed by the board, let's say, we don't have the condo association agreeing to them, So puts the county in a position of potential third-party lawsuit from a condo association. I'm just theoretically saying this.
Yeah.
So the point of the legal memo was that all parties, all property owners or interested parties within the boundaries of the GDP have not signed the application. So it raises potential issues for the county. I just want to state that for the record, and as you can see, there are ongoing discussions on those points.
Correct. Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Just a minute, Mr. Horrigan?
Yeah. Dr. Arsenault, do you have your corporation, which is your association, is active and fully up to speed with what is required by the state of Florida?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay, so you've got all that documentation in place, so you are an association for real.
We are a real association. We have our annual meeting. We have leadership in place, budgets that are approved, documents that are filed, minutes, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bauer?
My question is more for staff and eventually for the applicant, so I don't know if you
Okay.
have more questions for the.
Okay, thank you very much.
Doctor.
Appreciate it.
Any other comments from the public, citizens? No one coming? We'll close the public comment portion. Ms. Leader, do you have any final comments?
No, no, at this moment, if you have any questions.
Yes, I do.
Just 1 second. Does the applicant have any comments they'd like to make?
I just wanted to clarify again, Scott Rudisil for the record. The comment was that, and the comments were that the association had been created, but the property, the common areas, have not been turned over to the association. So while there is an association, it doesn't own the common areas. So that, I just wanted to clarify that. And obviously, this is a GDP, so a lot of these details about ultimately how the site plan will lay out haven't been determined yet. Thank you.
Mr. Bauer?
So what, sir, if you don't mind. Trying to put my thoughts together here. So we've heard different legal opinions from yourself or somebody else, Mr. Knowles, and so forth about these issues. Has anybody brought it to the matter to the court to find as a matter of law this is the case? I mean, this attorney's opinion, no offense, every attorney has a different opinion. Okay, it depends on what side of the fence you're on. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. But have we got an adjudication to say the condo does not own the land, or the condo doesn't have any rights? The condo association doesn't have a say in this because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I don't know that any of those facts are in dispute. I mean, the fact that the developer owns the property, the fact that that the property wasn't turned over, the common areas weren't turned over to the association, and that the developer does recognize that that there are some requirements in place that they provide them with access and things like that. I don't know that any of that's in dispute. And I don't know that the comments from the association president were different than that.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused in terms, so are you, my thought is that from the county or county attorney's office perspective, potentially, that it is not clear as to whether there are any additional parties other than the applicant, which in fact there might be additional parties other than the applicant to this process. But you're saying there are no other parties, you're the applicant, there's zero other parties, period.
Correct.
But you're hearing from our side, from our attorney, that we think there could be other parties.
Well, I think what the county attorney's office has said is there's a condominium association that clearly may have interest in what's going on, but they don't have an ownership interest in the property that is before this board.
Okay. Let me
Go ahead,
take
I'm
a little bit
sorry.
further.
Yep.
And so you agree, this is a little bit off the
Oh,
off
sure.
the norm, right?
It's and like I said, on a failed project like this, there's going to be unique circumstances to work through.
I don't know if it's ever done before or not, but my thought process is, so how does the county protect itself, thus protect the taxpayers from potentially a lawsuit? Because it sounds like the condo association, it sounds like they're not in agreement. In fact, things may be kind of stalled. My point is, if the applicant is so sure of its position, is there something that the county can ask or the applicant is willing to do to protect the county should a lawsuit ensue and return, basically, accept the liability and potential attorney fees and costs for the county should something happen, if you're so sure?
Well, again, like I said, this is an issue the county has on every development application where there are third parties. And I don't think that, there were some comments from the association president about there's some details that need to be worked out. We haven't come to agreement on a lot of these concepts. But I didn't hear that they objected to the project. I would imagine they want to see it completed. So like I said, no, the applicant's not going to offer to indemnify the county, nor do I think the county would be comfortable with that either. But like I said, this is no different than any other project, except this is a little bit different because you do a number of projects where you actually have third parties that are vocally objecting, and we don't have that situation here.
Question, go ahead. You have a comment? Go ahead.
I do. I'm Rachel Layton. I'm the planner with ZNS Engineering, and I really feel like in order for you guys to understand where we're coming with the plan is to show you what's existing and what is proposed on one of the site plans, to talk about access, parking, stormwater, those things, those common elements that everybody's really is the underlying concern. Yes, there are legal issues here at play too, but if I could just spend 2 minutes to try and review what the plan looks like now and what our bubble plan shows. And again, all of these things have to go to final site plan review for final detailed review. And if we are not in compliance and not continuing to provide those things for those property owners, we won't be able to move forward with anything outside of the general development plan. So I wanted to kind of set the tone with that. And I appreciate the opportunity to have a few minutes to talk about the plan.
If it will help us, proceed, please.
So this plan that's in front of you right now, I actually think we probably need to zoom in on it a little bit. It shows the access coming in on Town Center Parkway with that 77th Terrace East coming into the project, and you can see it's right now kind of a main entrance road into the project, and the buildings that are existing are shown in the heavier gray, with the parking outline and the buffers along I-75 are all existing. Stormwater ponds are in. The design right now has been laid out to protect the perennial stream and the wetlands that are there with 50-foot setbacks. All of those things are existing and have been maintained all this time. What Medallion bought was everything that was outside of those gray boxes, except for the little area in between. So there's, on the property appraiser's maps, there's a little box that's drawn around each of these gray buildings. And that's what's not within the application that you're seeing in front of you today. So what I want to show you next is the conceptual, I apologize, general development plan. So what we're showing in this, it's a very low level of detail, but really what we're trying to get approved is the use and the ability to move forward with one of these plans when the property can be developed into another plan, whether it be office and ALF, or multifamily homes. So you can see where we're preserving all of the same features with the 50-foot buffers for the wetlands and the perennial stream. All of the buffers around the exterior are preserved. The 35-foot landscape buffer is preserved. And what we've done, this is the multifamily plan. We've drawn a box around the offices and then also along some of the parking. But what we've done on all of these plans and in the stipulations with staff is to agree that those parking spaces, that access must be maintained for those office users, that those rights for them are preserved, not only through the condo association documents, but on this general development plan and in the stipulations that are agreed to by the applicant that staff created. So I hope that sort of tries to, we're not trying to tear out everything, every improvement that's there and come up with something new that would block their access or block their view or take away any landscaping or stormwater. All of those things are part of this plan that meets the code and meets the comprehensive plan. And staff has reviewed all of those things to make sure that we're in compliance. And it's been a long road, both legal and planning-wise. And so we're here in front of you today, notwithstanding those things that would still need to be worked out on a final site plan where we have that additional level of detail. We don't have that on a general development plan. So I really wanted to have an opportunity to spend a few minutes to try and answer, to show you what's existing and what's being proposed. Those access points are the same. We have to maintain their parking. We can't take away those things in the site planning process, and I think staff would agree with my statement on that, because that's been one of the things that we've really worked hard on planning-wise.
Can you go back to your previous picture for a second, please? So if my understanding, and this is just my opinion, is correct, the 4 boxes that we have here, those in the dark gray, those are the ones that are owned and controlled, et cetera, by the existing HOA.
Correct.
And anything that happens on and around those properties is under their direction.
They own just a very specific bubble.
Right, okay.
But they have, because of the condo association documents, they have rights to have access and stormwater and utilities and those
Sure,
things.
okay.
And those will continue to be provided.
I understand that. Now, the rest of the property, though, okay, is not under the current HOA, even though they have an interest, and I can see where they definitely would have an interest of what's going to happen there. They really have no legal right to that because it's outside of, like you said, the bubble of what their current rights are with these 4 buildings.
I can answer the ownership question. I can't answer the HOA. I'm the planner, so that's
Okay,
outside of
right.
my expertise. Scott or Pete, I don't know if you can answer that question more specifically.
Well, it was meant for the applicant, not necessarily you, right? Since you didn't.
I have a question of,
Oh, just
Planner.
1 second, Scott, okay.
Right.
Mr. Horrigan.
You're correct. You're correct. They don't have an ownership interest in the remainder of the parcel.
So just as you have an interest in what they have, they also would have a common interest in what you have. And in the world of, in the best scenario for both, their access, their parking, all of those rights that they now have
Sure.
to have them a viable business, common sense would basically say, you're going to continue with those.
Right, well,
I
we've
would think.
stipulated to that. There's a stipulation that says that if the parking area is modified, that it would be, have to be provided in accordance with county code at the time of final site plan. So they will ultimately have parking and stormwater and everything buffering that meets county requirements and is consistent with this plan.
Right. And staff's comfortable with that comment, correct?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Mr. Horrigan.
just so I'm absolutely certain, the gray boxes, that footprint is the only thing that the association owns, those 4 boxes.
Yes, that's my
They
understanding.
don't own the sidewalk between the 2 boxes or anything, they just own the boxes.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, the condominium association has legal rights in the common elements. Until the applicant and the condo association go through whatever process required to amend the declaration of condominium, the declaration of condominium recorded in public records gives them an equitable servitude for all those common elements, which are shown to include all the access and drainage and so forth. So it's not just as simple as property ownership. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Mr. Rutledge.
Yeah, may I ask you to put up the multifamily design that you had with the shading? So, one of the things we're supposed to find is compatibility. You know, we have the zoning things, they're kind of templates, and we look at stuff. And so, my challenge where I put multifamily next to commercial, multifamily has a lot more, in my opinion, flexibility. Commercial doesn't. It has to have a certain feel and whatever. And so if this whole property is yours to control and you carve out that little section, the multifamily can, as opposed to an office, doesn't have shared parking. It has a berm and a fence and a trash can and people looking up 4 stories and so forth. And so my curiosity is whether a multifamily is really one of those 3 things that's really, quote, compatible. I think, senior living, they're maintained, parking's not a really big issue, you end up with a field of parking. If you carve this out and put your property usage all the way up to their buildings, and you change the access, because there's some great designs that, you can look at Canaan's development at Lakewood Ranch or stuff they've done. They've got great access, there's beautiful fountains, and you drive around. It doesn't inure to the benefit of that commercial user as a design concept. And so my question, and this is kind of where I was trying to get to with this rights in the common areas, it's conceivable that you could take all those parking that was deemed at the original plan when they bought into it, with this parking and other compatible tenants, which were office, as their kind of purchased expectation, to now say, oh, I'm going to put a 20-foot berm and a fence on top of that, and you won't even see me, but you don't have the same feel for your commercial pod. And I just, that would be a question of compatibility with these adjacent components. And that's, like, if you kept everything in the modules that were designed as commercial development, then you're right. You haven't changed the parking, you haven't changed the access, whatever. But if you were to come back with a plan and say, oh, by the way, I just need a little more space, and I want to connect all this, I don't want to have the breach between the drive access that we have today, because I want to have a unified access for, to walk to the pool or do those things. That's the sensitivity that I have when I say, is it compatible? Not that you couldn't have the zoning, but you have three choices, and they're pretty different.
They are, and I do have elevations to show everyone, if I could.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask
Show
for that, so.
those. What we've been proposing for the multi-story is a 5-story over parking building with an 80-foot height restriction, so that we can have the building all on the north side of the property, so that most of the parking doesn't get changed for them. So we've asked for that increase in height as part of this multifamily so that we could do that. And we do have elevations that are entered into the record that are part of your agenda package.
Well, and I'm not trying to push too far into that. I'm just trying to say, when I look at this and say whether it should have that zoning modification, and I like the idea that you're addressing a problem piece of property that's been sitting there since I moved here, right? So I like all that. The thing that we have is we've got a design commercial component there that could be substantially, could have an impact on it. And I just want to be sure that when we give them that zoning, we've done a compatibility like every place else.
Absolutely. And through the review process, we did find that it was compatible. There is multifamily to the north of this area as well.
Sure.
So this absolutely is compatible with everything else that's in the area.
Except for maybe them, if you put a 5-story building and they don't have that parking field. That's where I'm kind of going to this. I don't know, it's just a thought.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bauer.
I'm not sure what the process is, but this is some additional information, which I think is very helpful. I would request that the public comment section of our hearing here be reopened, because I do have a couple questions for the doctor as a result of this information.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I would agree with that. I was going to suggest that when they were done with their
Okay,
presentation.
fine. We'll do it, Mr. Bauer. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant at this point? Okay. Open it up to the citizens again. Doctor, on the HOA issue, please.
Compatibility.
And I guess they were referring to the various plans that are before us, options. Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments, because we've had the same concerns, especially when you see the diagram with our 4 lonely buildings in a sea of what could be, dramatically changed from what we originally purchased and had the expectation. And there are commercial considerations. We are a dermatology office, and the nature of that work is that there are a lot of patients seen per day, and there's a lot of parking requirements. So I appreciate the opportunity to answer more questions.
Mr. Bauer?
Had you seen that diagram before?
That one I have not seen. I had seen a diagram before which showed the south part of the property intact and the north part of the property modified. And the access road coming in, as it comes in now, it comes to a certain point in the middle of the property, and effectively T-stops at a berm, and then there's parking there. The proposal I had seen before showed that road going all the way through, and we didn't know. It effectively looked like a north-south division of this space, but we didn't know exactly how that was going to play out. And, that's why we had sought legal counsel, and the attorneys are speaking to each other. And as I had mentioned before, some progress was made. I think things have kind of trailed off. I would say, But no, that, to answer your question, no, I hadn't seen that before. And I'm kind of glad that I did, because it made me even a little bit more concerned about the possibilities here as a result of this meeting.
Okay. I wanted, basically, I was seeking, you're a landowner. Hadn't bought this parcel of land and developed your portion with an expectation of what I'm assuming the north side was going to look like. I was kind of thinking exactly what Commissioner Rutledge was thinking. He just got to say it before I did. But I needed, and I think we needed to hear from you as an example of potentially some issues, especially as it relates to compatibility. I suspect there might be a way to actually accomplish something, but I wanted to hear that from you.
Well, getting back to a comment that was made earlier, I think it's pretty obvious that it's in our interest and Medallion's interest, and I believe in the county's interest, to complete the development of this property on some level. Being the first to buy into this property and then assume responsibility for the developer leaving and going through the process, developing the association, and then being the president of that association and all the challenges therein. Clearly I'm very invested in the outcome of this property, and to have it sit vacant is really not helping anybody. I can say that when the association did meet, we were presented with the idea of three options. Multifamily was the one that would resonated with us the least, to say the least. We didn't understand how that could work very well. I think that there's a lot of concerns there. I mean, the operation of commercial property is very different in my view of how a residential would work. We saw whatever the plan was, maybe it was A or B, where it would be an extension of commercial that made a lot of sense to us. It's a natural extension of what is there and what, frankly, we originally signed up for. Option B, the assisted living facility, I believe Mr. Rutledge made that comment that the parking concerns are not as much of a concern. It's at least medical on some level, so that resonated with us. I don't know if that answered your question, but the multifamily was the component to this that I think had the most concern from our point of view.
Thank you. Mr. Rutledge?
Yeah, and listen, first of all, I commend Medallion for getting in there and straightening out something that's kind of a mess, because these things can sit around for 20 years. I was involved in one, and it's not good. Same thing with you all. You guys, when you go into that entrance, you're kind of over there, but to put, if you put a bunch of housing in front of it, that's sensitive. I like the LF idea because it's kind of communal to that area. That road has several people on that's consistent with that, and they're a consumer of medical products. So I argue all those things work well. I think the challenge a little bit I have with the design features that you want to accomplish. I did 200 units right next to a commercial site, and there were a lot of things we had to consider about the commercial component. So I like the idea. I like everything except for the uncertainty I have about how the multifamily would be executed. If it were north of all this, I wouldn't have any compatibility problems. They're on the south side. They got that. They have a roadway. I'm on the other side. I don't care. That all is compatible to me. When they get too close into that and you start, I don't know, you want 5 stories. I'm okay with 5 stories. I'd go 8, but I just think that that's the thing that I just don't know enough to respond to. And that makes me a little nervous because I think you guys are Medallion's smart enough to figure this out. They could tell us, I think, if they thought about it some more, but thanks.
Any comments for the doctor? Okay. Any comments final comments from the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Yeah, just very briefly, I want to explain why the map looks like that and why the GDP looks like that for multifamily. What you're seeing there is a conceptual bubble plan for the purposes of the density calculations, okay? So in order to get to the density number for the multifamily, they had to count the areas that you see there, but there's no intent to put the multifamily on top of the office. That part of the plan hasn't changed. That was purely just to reach the density numbers and calculate it, if that helps.
Yeah, it's very helpful, and I think that's one of the things that I know you guys are sophisticated guys, you've done this a lot. The challenge I have is I have what I have in front of me.
Sure.
And so it's hard for me to say that's compatible, because I can imagine terrible things. I see terrible things going on all the time, right? So, but, you know, you guys are in the neighborhood, you do a lot of stuff. It just seems like something be helpful if it was clear. Now, our process may not permit it to be clear at this point, but
Final,
And I did want to note that it's my understanding that a full copy of the staff report, including all the plans and everything, was provided to the association's council prior to the meeting today. Obviously, we've been in this process a long time. We've had a number of delays along the way, and there hasn't been a lot of change in terms of what's actually planned for the project. So that may explain why there hasn't been a whole lot of communication. There's just been nothing going on for some time, so.
Mr. Bauer?
All right, so here's where I'm at. You know, I agree with Commissioner Rutledge on an array of issues, including, you know, be great to have something done here. Right now, I can tell you, I can't support option C, just from a compatibility issue. Now, it doesn't mean that it couldn't be done, and if you came to us with option C and there was an agreement amongst all the parties for option C in some fashion, especially from the owners to the south, then I could see that happening. You could sit here and say, well, this is just a rezone, it's just an option. But at the same time, you come back with a final site plan, and as long as it meets the comp plan and the codes, potentially you get it approved, and they virtually have no way to combat that at all. If you said you're going to take option C off the table today, I can give you my yes. But if option C is still on the table, I can't support it. I just don't think it's compatible.
Mr. Horrigan?
When you said that the residential was there just for density purposes, are you saying to us that the residential component would be on the north side of that entry road?
Yeah, I think that is the expectation, yes, and that's the way it was, when we originally came in with the plan, that was the way it was originally shown.
Sorry, we're listening back there, and we're trying to find a way to help give that comfort level. And we would be happy to stipulate that we would put the multifamily building only on the northern half of the property.
Perfect. Works for me.
I think that'd be helpful. Right.
Works for me.
Thank you.
I find that a great solution, and I appreciate that very much. I think that's tremendous community commitment. Thanks.
Any further comments from commissioners? Thank you.
I'd like to move to.
Oh, Mr. Pedley.
One point of clarification, on behalf of the school district, we submitted a school report that indicated that capacity was available for elementary and middle schools, but not for high schools. Since that time, we have amended our work plan, and now capacity is available for high schools. We intend to build a new high school opening August of 19 on Erie Road, and I just wanted to make sure that got in the record because the staff report indicates otherwise.
Thank you for that update. Okay.
Which one do we? Oh, I thought you were making a motion.
Oh, any discussion from commissioners? Do I have a motion then for item number 5?
I move to accept.
With the stipulation?
With the stipulation as presented, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to point out, there's a stipulation in your update memo that's revised, to the revised motion.
This is why I don't make motion.
And so that's one change. And the other stipulation, someone needs to read it into the record. The applicant property stipulation, the option C multifamily would be designed such that the multifamily building would be located in the northern half of the project site. Rosina, is that detailed enough for?
I think so.
Okay. And then the update memo then refers to stipulation C1 through C4 in each option rather than C1 through C5. I just want to state that for record.
Okay. Mr. Rutledge, is that still good with your?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Mr. Horrigan, all in favor of the motion as stated with the stipulations? Vote aye.
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks for working it out for us.
Yeah, good
Yes,
job.
appreciate that. Commissioners, any comments?
Good
Before we
job,
adjourn?
Chair.
All right, we'll adjourn. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, thank you. All right.